The autumn twilight was settling over Melbourne's Moorabbin Airport on October 21, 1978, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. 20-year-old Frederick Valentich stood beside his Cessna 182 liters, registration VHDSJ, running through his pre-flight checklist with the methodical precision that had been drilled into him during flight training. The single-engine aircraft gleamed white in the fading light, its fuel tanks filled to capacity enough for 5 hours of flying time. Frederick was young, eager, and passionate about aviation. With approximately 150 hours of flight experience under his belt, he wasn't a complete novice, but he was still building his skills, still chasing that dream of becoming a commercial pilot. Tonight's flight was supposed to be routine, a simple training exercise across Bass Strait to King Island, where he planned to pick up some friends before returning to Melbourne. It should have been an unremarkable Saturday evening flight. But some flights are anything but routine. As Frederick completed his meteorological briefing at 6:19 p.m., the weather report seemed favorable enough. The Bass Strait, that notorious stretch of water separating mainland Australia from Tasmania, was known for its unpredictable conditions, but tonight appeared calm. The young pilot couldn't have known that he was about to embark on a journey that would become one of aviation's most enduring mysteries, a case that would spawn decades of investigation, speculation, and fear. At exactly 6:19 p.m., Frederick's Cessna lifted off from Moorabbin Airport, its engine humming steadily as it climbed into the darkening sky. The aircraft turned southeast, heading toward King Island, approximately 125 nautical miles away across the Bass Strait. For the first 47 minutes of the flight, everything proceeded normally. Frederick maintained radio contact with Melbourne Flight Service, his voice calm and professional as he reported his position and status. But as the sun disappeared completely behind the horizon and darkness enveloped the Bass Strait, something began to go terribly wrong. At 7:06 p.m., Frederick's voice crackled through the radio at Melbourne Flight Service, but this time there was something different in his tone, a note of concern, perhaps confusion. Air Traffic Controller Steve Roby was on duty that evening, and what he was about to hear would haunt him for the rest of his life. Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet. Is there any known traffic below 5,000? The question seemed routine enough. Roby checked his radar screen and responded that there was no known aircraft in Valentich's vicinity. But Frederick's next transmission sent a chill through the control room. Delta Sierra Juliet, I am. It seems to be a large aircraft below 5,000. Roby confirmed again that there was no known traffic in the area. But Frederick insisted he could see an aircraft with 4 bright lights, approximately 1,000 feet above him. The lights, he reported, appeared to be landing lights or strobe lights, but their configuration was unlike anything he'd seen before. What happened next would transform a routine training flight into a nightmare that defied explanation. Melbourne, this is Delta Sierra Juliet, Frederick's voice came through the radio, now edged with unmistakable anxiety. The aircraft has just passed over me at least 1,000 feet above. Roby asked Frederick to identify the aircraft type, but the young pilot's response was deeply unsettling. I cannot identify the type, but it is 4 bright. It seems to me like landing lights. As minutes ticked by, Frederick's reports became increasingly erratic and frightening. The mysterious aircraft appeared to be playing some sort of deadly game, approaching his Cessna, then retreating, then approaching again. At 7:09 p.m., Frederick reported that the object was now approaching from the southeast, coming directly toward him. Delta Sierra Juliet, it's approaching now from due east towards me. His voice transmitted across the airwaves, tension clearly audible. But then something even more terrifying happened. The aircraft seemed to disappear and reappear at will. Delta Sierra Juliet, it seems to me that he's playing some sort of game. He's flying over me too, 3 times at speeds I could not identify. The word game sent shivers through anyone listening to the transmission. What kind of aircraft plays games with a small training plane over the dark, remote waters of Bass Strait? What kind of pilot would engage in such reckless behavior? But Frederick's next transmission suggested this was no ordinary aircraft at all. Melbourne, Delta Sierra Juliet, it's not an aircraft. Those 5 words would echo through the decades that followed. Not an aircraft. But if it wasn't an aircraft, what was it? And why was it toying with a young pilot flying alone over one of Australia's most treacherous waterways? At 7:10 p.m., Frederick reported that the mysterious object had moved to the northwest of his position and appeared to be stationary. He described it as hovering, something that conventional aircraft of that era couldn't do, at least not the type of aircraft that would be flying in that remote area on a Saturday evening. Roby, maintaining his professional composure despite the increasingly bizarre nature of the reports, asked Frederick to confirm his altitude and intentions. Frederick reported that he was maintaining 4,500 feet and proceeding toward King Island. But his voice carried an undercurrent of fear that was impossible to miss. "The engine is rough idling," Frederick reported suddenly. "I've got it set at 2324 and the thing is coughing. Engine trouble. Every pilot's nightmare, especially when flying alone over water at night." But this wasn't random mechanical failure. Frederick's engine had been running perfectly fine until the mysterious object appeared. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. Roby asked what Frederick's intentions were, but the response was fragmented, confused. "My intentions are to go to King Island. Melbourne. That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again." The phrase "hovering on top of me again" conveyed a terror that transcended normal fear. This wasn't just engine trouble or navigation confusion, this was something else entirely. Something that could hover silently above a small aircraft in the middle of the night, something that could cause a perfectly good engine to suddenly malfunction. Frederick's final coherent transmissions painted a picture of absolute horror. "It is hovering and it's not an aircraft." Then came 17 seconds of metallic, grinding sounds that aviation experts would later describe as unlike anything typically heard from aircraft equipment or radio interference. These weren't the sounds of a normal aircraft engine or radio static. They were something else entirely, something that seemed to emanate from whatever was hovering above Frederick's Cessna in the darkness. At 7:12 p.m., Frederick Valentich's voice fell silent forever. Melbourne Flight Service tried desperately to re-establish contact. "Delta Sierra Juliet, Melbourne," Roby called repeatedly, his voice becoming increasingly urgent. But there was no response. The young pilot and his aircraft had simply vanished into the night, leaving behind only questions that would torment investigators for decades. The immediate search and rescue operation was launched at dawn, but the Bass Strait is an unforgiving body of water. The search area covered thousands of square miles of choppy, dark water where wreckage could sink quickly or be carried away by strong currents. Despite extensive efforts involving aircraft, ships, and even satellite imagery, no trace of Frederick Valentich or his Cessna was ever found. The official investigation, conducted by the Australian Department of Transport, concluded that the aircraft had crashed into the sea, likely due to pilot disorientation or spatial disorientation. The investigators suggested that Frederick had probably become confused in the darkness, possibly seeing his own aircraft lights reflected in the water, and had inadvertently flown his plane into the Bass Strait. But this explanation felt hollow to many who heard the actual radio transmissions. How could reflected lights cause an engine to run rough? How could spatial disorientation create the sounds of a metallic, grinding noise that lasted 17 seconds? And most disturbing of all, how could Frederick have mistaken reflections for an object that was hovering on top of me again? The case attracted the attention of UFO researchers worldwide, who pointed to Frederick's clear statements that the object was not an aircraft as evidence of extraterrestrial contact. They noted that Frederick was a trained pilot who would have been familiar with all conventional aircraft types flying in Australian airspace. His insistence that the object could hover, combined with its apparent ability to make his engine malfunction, suggested technology far beyond anything available in 1978. Skeptics countered that Frederick was a relatively inexperienced pilot who might have become confused or disoriented while flying alone at night over water, a notoriously challenging environment for even experienced aviators. They suggested that what he interpreted as an unusual aircraft might have been Venus, which was particularly bright that evening, or possibly another conventional aircraft whose lights created an optical illusion in the darkness. But Venus doesn't cause engines to malfunction. Venus doesn't hover on top of aircraft. And Venus certainly doesn't create 17 seconds of unexplained metallic sounds before a pilot and his aircraft vanish without a trace. 5 years after Frederick's disappearance, a piece of metal was found on Flinders Island, part of the Furneaux Group in Bass Strait. Initial reports suggested it might be wreckage from the missing Cessna, raising hopes that the mystery might finally be solved. However, closer examination revealed that the metal fragment was not from Frederick's aircraft, adding yet another layer of frustration to the case. The Valentich family never gave up hope of finding answers. Frederick's father, Guido Valentich, spent years pursuing every lead, following up on reported sightings, and pressing authorities to keep the case active. He maintained that his son was an experienced and careful pilot who would never have made the kind of basic errors suggested by the official investigation. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Frederick Valentich case isn't what was recorded, it's what might have been left unrecorded. The radio transmission that has been made public ends with those 17 seconds of strange metallic sounds, but some researchers have claimed that there were additional transmissions that were never released to the public. What might Frederick have said in those final moments? What might he have seen that was too terrifying, too impossible, to be shared with the world? The Bass Strait itself adds another layer of eeriness to the story. This body of water has a reputation among pilots and sailors as one of the most dangerous in the world, not just because of its unpredictable weather, but because of the numerous unexplained disappearances that have occurred there over the decades. Some have called it Australia's Bermuda Triangle, a place where aircraft and ships vanish without explanation, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. In the years following Frederick's disappearance, other pilots reported strange encounters over Bass Strait. Some described unusual lights that seemed to follow their aircraft. Others reported temporary engine malfunctions that resolved themselves just as mysteriously as they began. While none of these incidents resulted in disappearances like Frederick's, they created a pattern that was difficult to ignore. The case has inspired books, documentaries, and countless investigations by both believers and skeptics. Each new examination of the evidence brings fresh perspectives but rarely brings definitive answers. The radio transcripts remain as chilling today as they were in 1978, capturing the final minutes of a young man's life as he encountered something that defied his understanding of the world. What makes the Frederick Valentich case particularly haunting is its authenticity. These aren't second-hand stories or urban legends passed down through generations. The radio transmissions were recorded by Melbourne Flight Service and have been analyzed by audio experts, aviation specialists, and investigators from around the world. Frederick's voice, growing increasingly frightened as he describes the impossible object hovering above him, is preserved forever on tape. The 17 seconds of metallic sounds that ended the transmission have been subjected to every form of analysis imaginable. Some experts suggest they could be the sounds of microphone interference or equipment malfunction. Others believe they might be the last sounds of Frederick's aircraft being destroyed or disabled by whatever was above him. The truth remains elusive, hidden somewhere in those strange, haunting noises that preceded eternal silence. For aviation enthusiasts, the case serves as a sobering reminder of how much we still don't understand about our world. Despite all our technology, all our instruments and radar systems, a young pilot and his aircraft could simply vanish over a well-traveled waterway without leaving behind a single piece of recoverable evidence. For believers in extraterrestrial visitation, Frederick Valentich represents a tragic encounter between human technology and something far more advanced. They point to his clear descriptions of impossible flight characteristics, the timing of his engine troubles, and the complete absence of wreckage as evidence that he encountered something not of this world. For skeptics, the case demonstrates the dangers of inexperienced pilots flying alone at night over water, and the ease with which optical illusions and spatial disorientation can lead to tragedy. They argue that Frederick's youth and relative inexperience, combined with challenging flight conditions, created a perfect storm for disaster. But regardless of one's beliefs about what Frederick encountered that night, one fact remains undeniable. A young man with dreams of becoming a commercial pilot took off from Moorabbin Airport on October 21, 1978, and was never seen again. His family lost a son, the aviation community lost a promising pilot, and the world gained one of its most enduring mysteries. The memorial plaque erected in Frederick's honor reads simply, "Frederick Valentich, pilot, disappeared over Bass Strait on October 21, 1978. But those simple words cannot capture the terror in his voice as he reported that something impossible was hovering above his aircraft, playing games with him in the darkness over one of the world's most treacherous bodies of water. Today, more than 4 decades later, pilots still report strange encounters over Bass Strait. Air traffic controllers occasionally receive reports of unusual aircraft behavior in the same general area where Frederick disappeared. While none of these modern incidents have resulted in disappearances, they serve as reminders that whatever Frederick encountered that night might still be out there, waiting in the darkness above the waves. The Frederick Valentich case stands as a testament to the limits of human knowledge and the persistence of mystery in our modern world. It reminds us that despite all our advances in technology and communication, there are still things that happen in our skies that we cannot explain, cannot understand, and cannot protect ourselves against. On quiet nights, when the wind is right and the Bass Strait is calm, some say you can still hear echoes of Frederick's final transmission bouncing across the waves. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft. And then, 17 seconds of impossible sounds, before silence claims another victim of the unknown.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share it with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey.